Good morning, class. This is Mrs. Davis. Welcome to Math 8. I'm so glad that you all could join me. We want to start today's class about a thought. How tall is that tree? Do you ever think about sometimes you look at something that's really tall and you have no idea how to estimate how tall it might be? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about what we're really trying to hit the bullseye with. We're trying to identify ratios to help with what we call indirect measurement, and that's exactly what we're doing there with the tree. We're indirectly measuring it. We are going to solve some ratios, and we are going to give examples of how we might use indirect measurement in our everyday life. So let's take a few moments and talk about how we can approach solving our problem of indirect measurement, our challenge today. And to do that, we've talked a lot in the past about how I have certain responsibilities and you have certain responsibilities as a student. My responsibilities as a teacher for this lesson are I'm going to provide you with some guided notes. And we've talked about in the past how important notes are to keep. And why is that? Well, our brain can only keep so much information in it. And the difference between a good learner and a great learner is that they realize they can't keep everything in their brain, but that there's a way that they can find that information if they forget it and when they forget it, and that is by taking good notes. So I'm depending upon you to take good notes and depending upon myself to give good notes to you. And that's what I'll be doing. I'll be providing you with information that you're going to fill in as we go through the lesson into your guided notes. I'm going to answer questions that you might have. I am going to ask you to try to hold those questions until we get to the group learning part. But if there's something that just really can't wait, I'll be glad to answer that for you. So your responsibilities are to actively listen. And we've talked about what actively listening means. It means giving me your eyes and ears for this small period of time, and then I'll turn the reins over to you, as we say. Don't be playing computer games, watching TV. You need a quiet time to really pay attention. We're going to have you take those notes. And I noticed I made a mistake. Mrs. Davis always tells you I'm not perfect. I said take your own notes. It's take your own notes. And then ask those questions at group time. So our question is, I wonder how we can measure something with great height. Should I use a tape measure? Should I guess? How tall is that tree? Well, let me share with you some things that we already know. And maybe you've already thought of these things as I've been talking. Last week, we did some work where we worked with triangles. And they were similar triangles. And we found out that we could find the height of one triangle by knowing the length and height of another triangle, as long as they were similar triangles. So what we did was we created ratios or proportions, and we've talked about ratios and proportions are basically the same. And a proportion just means that one ratio is proportionate to the other, so that's why we use them interchangeably. But we use those to build an equation for the first and second triangle. And I predict that we can use that same process to find the height of our tree. So the question is going to be, though, is we can think about our tree, the height, and what are we going to use as the length? Maybe the shadow? I don't know. And then that's going to give us maybe one triangle, but where are we going to get our other triangle from? Well, what I'm going to have us do is seek some help from some of my friends. So I'm going to turn my lesson over to some friends who agreed to help me. I hope you enjoy, and I'll rejoin you in a moment. Welcome back, class, from our little field trip that we took with my friends. I want to thank my daughter Haley and her friends Brandon, Devin, and Ashley. And I hope you enjoyed how they were able to figure out the height of a tree and height of a lamppost using indirect measurement. So let's talk a little bit more about what they did. What did the tree and the lamppost have to do with triangles? Well, if you see on my slide that's in front of you, you can actually make an imaginary triangle with two objects where there's an example there where they used the lamppost, and then we'll pretend that the little lady there is my daughter Haley. And you can see that we have the height of those two objects, the lamppost and Haley, and then we're using the shadows of those two objects to be our length, which creates two similar triangles. So knowing that information, we are then able to create our proportions as they showed us how to do and come up with the solution to our problem. So as we know, we are all human and we all make mistakes, just like Mrs. Davis made that mistake at the beginning of this lesson. And I left it there for a purpose, whether you believe me or not, to show that, mistakes happen and we learn from our mistakes. And we should be thinking about mistakes before we actually go into solving a problem. So there's some things that we can think about in this scenario of doing indirect measurement that might avoid us or prevent us from getting incorrect answers. So what should we think about? What should we watch out for? Well, one thing is units of measure. For instance, does it matter how my friends took their steps? In other words, would it make sense if I'm setting up my proportion that we need to know the length of the shadow of both say, the tree and of Haley? Well, would it make sense for Brandon to walk off the height of the tree and Ashley to walk off the height of Haley? Probably not, because their strides are probably going to be really different from one another. I believe, or I predict, that Brandon's stride is going to be a lot larger than Ashley's stride. So that's one thing we can look out for. And you'll even notice that Brandon, when he measured off the tree and off Haley's shadow, that he was probably a little bit more accurate in his measurement technique than maybe what Devin was with the lamppost. And why would that be? Well, because Brandon was going to heel to toe, where Devin was just walking off steps. But either way, they both did a great job. And the other thing we need to think about is, does it matter how we set up our proportion? Well, we talked a lot about that last week, but it really does. We have numerators at the top of our proportions, and we have denominators at the bottom. And it's really important that we keep our apples and oranges together, as we say. So what I mean by that is when my friends showed us how to solve those proportions for indirect measurement, you'll notice that they put the measurements of the tree shadows at the top and the measurements for the tree at the top and the measurements for the person at the bottom. So the tree measurements were the numerators, the person measurements were the denominators, and that's very important. So enough of me talking and even my friends talking. I want you, my new friends, to be able to do some work and try it out for yourself. And what I'd like you to do then is we're going to try it all together though. Again, this is a new concept, so I don't expect you to get everything exactly right, but I want you to try your hardest. So I'm going to put you into groups of 3 right now. And my job is going to be that I'm going to visit each one of your groups multiple times and make sure that you're working through these 2 problems that I'm going to give you and answer any questions that you might have or reteach a couple of things if you're confused. So now is the time to ask those questions, and I'll give you as much help as I possibly can. The other part of it is you have a job. I want you to work hard at solving those problems. And we've talked a lot about when you work in a group that everyone helps. Excuse me. And it is a responsibility for everyone to help and everyone to understand. So if someone in your group is having a little trouble, do you think you just ignore them and don't help them out or wait for Mrs. Davis? No. If someone else in the group knows, you're going to be the teacher. Okay? So everyone is going to work hard. Everyone's going to work as a team. And the other thing is, as we know in math, it's always important to show all of your work because Mrs. Davis is going to review your work when I pop into your groups, but also after class so that I can give you some really good feedback tomorrow. All right, best of luck, and I'll see you in your group. Welcome back, everyone. Wonderful teamwork. You see, when you work as a team, everybody learns something, and it can be really enjoyable. I saw a lot of good collaboration and working together today, and I really appreciate that. I saw people helping one another, saw people giving me answers, and just really having a good time. So that's what it's all about. You're all amazing mathematicians, and I just want to give you a round of applause. Give yourself a round of applause. And just one last thing. I do have a homework assignment for you this evening. It is shouldn't take you very long, maybe 10 minutes at the most, but I want you to really put some thought into it. I'm going to email you a rubric. We all know what a rubric is. It's a way for us to really understand where we are with our learning and whether we need more help, whether we think we've mastered the subject. And we're actually going to look at it from a group perspective today. I want you to think about how your group worked together and were able to accomplish your task in a timely manner. And then what will happen is I will look over those. You're going to email them back to me this evening. And I will look over those before class tomorrow. I'll give you some feedback about how we might be able to improve our group work and talk more about the concepts that we learned today. So once again, I really appreciate all the hard work today. I hope you enjoyed yourself and learned a lot. And we will see you tomorrow. Have a good night.